Welcome to Wisdom Unveiled. This is our ninth deep dive, part of a 15-part series where we're really exploring the philosophical depths in the work of Hakim Abul Qasim Ferdowsi.
It's fascinating, isn't it, to look beyond the Shahnameh just as this incredible epic poem and see it through the philosophical lens offered by the thinkers in our sources today.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we're drawing specifically from audio conversations with Dr. Ibrahim Dinani and Dr. Esmail Mansouri Larijani, two really respected Iranian philosophers from the program Marfat.
Right. So our aim isn't just to, give a summary. We want to really dig into what these conversations reveal about Ferdowsi himself, particularly his role as a hakim, a sage philosopher.
And we'll do that by looking closely at specific points they raised and some really powerful verses from the Shahnameh that they highlighted.
Okay. And before we jump in, we should include our usual disclaimer.
Yes, definitely.
This deep dive is essentially a translation and reproduction of conversations with these Iranian philosophers. Now, because we're working across languages and interpretations, some nuances, some concepts, well, they might not be fully captured.
Exactly. So we apologize in advance for any, discrepancies that might pop up. And as always, your feedback, your suggestions, they're really welcome.
Great.
So if you've joined us for earlier deep dives in this series, you'll know we've already touched on the Shahnameh as a grand epic, a Hamasa, and how it's really grounded in Tawhid, God's unity, and the absolutely central role of Quran, intellect, in Ferdowsi's thinking.
Yeah, those are the foundations they really establish. And today we're building on that. We're exploring further dimensions of his thought that these specific philosophers brought out.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, particularly the connection between the past and the future, which is maybe not what you'd first expect. Also, the nature of existence itself, hasti and truth, rasti, and how these big ideas get woven into the symbolism in his poetry.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. This idea about the past, it sounds quite profound. They talked about history, Turek.
They did, and one really striking idea was that someone who doesn't know their past, well, they essentially remain a child forever.
A child. In what sense?
In the sense that ignorance of your history doesn't just mean you don't know facts. They argued it means you lack a real future, you lack a vision for yourself, you lack aspiration. You're kind of stuck.
Unable to move forward properly.
Exactly. Perpetually childlike in that way.
They used an analogy, didn't they?
Yeah.
About knowing your mother versus your father.
Yes, that was interesting. Knowing your mother is presented as, well, maybe easier, more intuitive, like knowing the immediate present.
Yeah.
But knowing your father, that's framed as harder. It takes intellect, Karad, real conscious effort.
And that symbolizes
Understanding your deeper roots, your origin, your nationality, your culture, your actual place in the grand scheme of things. It's not just instinct. It's an intellectual act to grasp where you truly come from.
Right. And it's not just about looking back, is it? They had this fascinating twist on it.
Yeah, that the past isn't just, trailing behind us like a ship's wake. They described it as actually moving before us, like a light, illuminating the path towards the future.
Wow. Okay, so without that light from history, you're walking in the dark.
Pretty much. No firm ground, no guidance ahead. And this, they argued, ties into Ferdowsi's core mission.
Which was?
To make us know our past, our history, to prevent us from becoming, as they put it, historyless.
That makes sense. So understanding history leads us to Ferdowsi and the Iranian nation, the Millet-e-Iran.
Exactly. The Shahnameh itself is this amazing mix, right? Myth, epic story, heroism, both spiritual and, physical and history all rolled into one.
And they pointed out something remarkable about the language itself.
Oh, yes. The sheer longevity and understandability of Ferdowsi's Persian over centuries. They contrasted it with, say, how tough it can be for modern English speakers to really get Shakespeare without help.
Right. And they brought up that famous line, Ajami zendi kardam bidin Parsi.
I revived the Persians with this Persian. It speaks volumes, doesn't it, about the cultural preservation.
It really does. And they were careful to define what Ferdowsi meant by Iranian nation, Millet-e-Iran.
Very careful. They stressed he wasn't talking about just one specific ethnicity, one qawm.
Whoa.
No, he meant all the different tribes and peoples living within that land, sharing that broader culture.
And this focus on culture and identity, they drew a line, didn't they? They said it's not racism, nizad parasti.
Absolutely. They were very firm on that. Racism is seen as completely unreasonable, and it's strongly condemned in Islam. They even quoted the Quranic verse.
Innama akramakum indallahi atqakum.
Exactly. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you.
Though they did acknowledge that historically some regimes haven't exactly followed that principle.
Unfortunately, yes. But Ferdowsi's focus in their interpretation is much deeper. It's on human culture, justice, truth, tawhid. These universal values that form the bedrock of that identity he sought to preserve.
Okay, so those are sort of the foundational ideas. Let's dive into some specific verses now, ones these philosophers use to illustrate his philosophical depth, starting with God, intellect, and the heart.
Right. There's this beautiful verse, Bi name kadavande kurshid oma, kedera binemesh keradadra.
Which translates as,
In the name of the Lord of sun and moon, whose name gave intellect the path to the heart.
whose name gave intellect the path to the heart. Okay, so the name Edeism is key here.
Very key. They explain that name isn't just a label. In this context, it's seen as the pathway to understanding God's attributes, how we access the divine reality.
And intellect, Karad, is what finds that path.
Precisely. Kerad is the faculty, the key that allows the heart, the seat of spiritual insight, to find the way to God's name. It connects back to that Quranic phrase they mentioned, La Kwamin Yakulim.
For a people who use their intellect. So without actively using Karad, that path remains closed.
That's the idea. It requires that conscious intellectual engagement.
Okay, moving on. Two other central concepts. Existence, hasti, and truth, rasti.
Yes, and another key verse. Karavande haisti oham raste nakaze tu kaji okasti.
Which means, Lord of existence and also truth does not desire crookedness or deficiency from you.
Now, the connection they highlighted here is really profound. They argued that truth, Rasti, isn't just a moral good. It is real existence, Hasti.
True is existence.
That's the claim. And conversely, crookedness, Kaji, which includes lies, deviation, injustice, isn't just bad behavior. It's a move away from real existence, a leaning towards non-existence, towards negation, Adam.
Wow. So living truthfully, living according to Rasti, means aligning yourself with reality itself.
Exactly. And acting crookedly is, in a way, acting against reality. They also interpreted Rasti here as encompassing justice, Adalo dad, acting rightly. So injustice is fundamentally anti-existence in this view.
That's a powerful framework.
It really is.
And it connects to another verse, doesn't it? About human limits and the effort involved in understanding God.
Yes. Situdan manuro nadanam hamiazan dishe John barfishanam hami.
I don't know how to praise him. I shed my soul from thinking effort.
The key word there is nadanam. They explained it doesn't just mean I lack the knowledge, it means I cannot. It expresses the fundamental inability of humans to fully grasp or praise God's infinite greatness. Our minds, our language just aren't sufficient.
Okay, I get that. But the second line, I shed my soul from thinking effort. Az andishe janam bar fishanam hami. What's that about?
They saw that as describing an incredibly intense effort, a real struggle in thought in Undisha. It's this relentless striving intellectually and spiritually.
Even knowing you can't fully succeed.
Yes, even though full praise or comprehension is impossible, the sheer effort, the struggle itself is portrayed as this profound act, almost shedding your soul in the attempt. They linked it beautifully to the Quran. Ila rabbika kathan famulaki.
Towards your Lord is your striving, and you will meet him.
Right. That word kad emphasizes continuous effort, struggle. The journey, the striving is the core thing, even if the destination's fullness is beyond our grasp.
And this striving connects to how God reveals himself. Through science, ayat, in creation.
Exactly. They pointed to this verse. Azugasht peda makan o zaman pey morbar hastiuneshan.
From him, space and time became manifest. The trace of an ant is a sign of his existence.
So space, makan, and time, zaman, these are presented as primary manifestations flowing directly from God.
Yeah.
And then even the tiniest thing imaginable, the trace of an ant, Peimer is presented as a powerful sign, a nishan of God's existence.
They distinguish nishan from alamat, right?
They did. An alamat is like a regular signpost. You see it, you interpret it. But a nishan, like an ayat in the Quran, isn't just pointing to the source. It actually carries something of the source within it. It's a direct trace, a manifestation.
That's subtle but significant.
Very. And they built on this, introducing the idea that space and time themselves are like extensions, maybe even the shadow, dole of God. They reference the Quranic phrase, kif madaztil, how the shadow extended.
Space and time is God's shadow. That's quite abstract.
It is. But the idea is they are manifestations pointing back to the source. They talked about how Makan and Zaman are intertwined and exist in different ways, even in spiritual realms.
And they connected this to Rumi.
Yes, to Rumi's line. Kifmadas dil nashi how the shadow extended is the mark of the saints. The implication being that the insan kamel, the perfect human, is where God's shadow, his manifestation, is seen most clearly, the most perfect reflection.
So the world needs such a figure.
In this view, yes. No world is complete without one. They even use the example of the prophet's Ma'ala moment, a state so unique that no other creation could follow, signifying a singular place of manifestation.
And thinking about that ant's trace, it brings to mind the story of Solomon and the ants from the Quran.
Absolutely, from Surah An-Naml. They specifically referenced it, where the ant warns its colony, enter your dwellings, that you may not be crushed by Solomon and his soldiers while they perceive not.
Right.
So what was the philosophical takeaway they drew from that story, connecting it back to Ferdowsi's verse?
Well, it's quite insightful. The ant, though tiny, is firmly within the circle of Hasti, existence, because it acts rightly, because it embodies Rasti by protecting its community.
Okay.
But Solomon, despite his immense power, if he were to transgress, symbolized by crushing the ants unknowingly, his greatness wouldn't place him within Hasti in that moment. The story reinforces that it's Rasti, truth, or rightness. That's the key to being truly within existence. It's not about power or size. It's about alignment with truth.
So alignment with truth is alignment with existence itself.
That's the core idea.
And this idea extends to the elements of creation, too.
Yes, they looked at another verse. Zikarene korshi tatirikak. Tegara barwataj hamanawipak. Deistiasdan gavahidahan ravane tura ashnaidahan.
Which translates to from the rotation of the sun to the particle of dust, also wind and fire, the same pure water, they bear witness to God's existence. They give acquaintance, familiarity to your soul.
So everything, the sun, dust, wind, fire, water, especially water, as life-giving.
Referencing wajalna minal mai kulashen he.
Right. All these things witness God's existence.
Yes, but crucially, look at the last line. Ravani tu ra ashne dahand. They give acquaintance or familiarity to your soul.
No.
Meaning these signs aren't foreign objects. They are inherently familiar, like acquaintances, to our conscious soul, the Ravan. Recognizing this witness in creation isn't learning something totally new. It's awakening the soul's awareness. It's a gahi of God. It brings a kind of soothing feeling, a nawazesh, a deep recognition.
That recognition naturally leads to thinking about God's nature and our response.
Exactly. Which brings us to this verse. Haranch afaraid astubinyast dar pachayash garden fairest.
Whatever he has created, he is needless of. In his kingship, be submissive.
This highlights God's absolute needlessness, binyazi matlak. He doesn't need creation. Creation utterly depends on him.
So given that immense greatness and self-sufficiency, the only fitting response is...
Start in fairest. Bow your head. Submit. Taslim.
And this submission, Taslim, they connected it back again.
Yes, back to Rasti, truth and rightness. Acting rightly, following the straight path that is the essence of true servitude, true submission to the King of existence and truth.
They drove this home with another verse about God's transcendence over worldly things.
Right. Zedastur gunjur was tajutak zekami obishi o iskam obakt hamebinas at estomabandahim a farmanoresh of kandahim.
Of minister and treasurer, of crown and throne, of less and more, of desire and fate. He is needless of all, and we are servants. To his command and will we bow our heads.
Yeah, it just reinforces that God is beyond all human structures of power, wealth, desire, even fate. We are servants, Banda, and our role is submission, following his command, which again means following the path of Rasti.
Okay, so from these core philosophical ideas, the discussion in the sources naturally moves towards Rustam, the great hero.
Indeed. They quoted, Shegefti begiti ze Rostam bas ast, kez udastan bardele harkasast.
Wonder in the world from Rustam is enough, whose story is in everyone's heart, acknowledging his huge presence.
Huge. But they presented him not just as a mighty warrior, but specifically as the Mazari Rasti.
The manifestation, the symbol, the embodiment of truth, Rasti.
Exactly. That's a crucial interpretation. He's portrayed as fundamentally truthful, no lies, no deceit, no tricks. He embodies true chivalry, photowat, straightforwardness.
And this truthfulness, this Rasti, is linked directly to his legendary strength.
Yes, not just physical power. Look at this verse they analyzed. Cho bamojiasti hamsufutad azuruzizuri rostambi bazufutad.
When he fell in line with the wave of existence, from him, the day of Rustam's strength came to his arm.
When he fell in line with the wave of existence. The interpretation is that aligning yourself with Hasti, existence specifically by living Rasti, by embodying truth, is what grants genuine strength.
So it's not just muscles, it's a deeper, almost divine power drawn from reality itself.
That's exactly the idea. This is the strength that brings victory, maybe even spiritual victory, if not always physical. They use other examples like Prophet Hud or Shiban Rai drawing protective lines.
Right, showing how alignment with Rasti gives a kind of power over the physical world, symbolizing this deeper strength from Hasti.
Exactly. And they also noted that later verses suggest Rustam's real strength stemmed from his inner piety, his worship. So his alignment wasn't just outward actions, but a deep inner state.
All this analysis, all these interpretations from Dr. Dinani and Dr. Larijani, it seems to paint a picture of Ferdowsi himself.
Yes, definitely. He's not just presented as a great poet or historian or, a theorist.
No, he comes across as something more.
He's highlighted as a practical sage, a Hakimi Amali, an ethical philosopher whose entire epic is infused with akhlaq, with practical wisdom, offering guidance for living a life aligned with these fundamental truths.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. What are the key takeaways from this deep dive, pulling together these threads?
Well, we've seen how Ferdowsi, through the interpretations presented, connects history and culture, existence, Hosti, and truth, Rasti, the role of intellect, Karad, and God's signs in creation.
And all these connections build a kind of framework, right?
Exactly. A framework suggesting that aligning yourself with these deep realities with Hosti and Rasti isn't just philosophy. It's presented as the source of real strength, real meaning, both internally and in how you navigate the world.
So Ferdowsi emerges from these conversations as much more than an epic poet. He's seen as a hakim, a sage.
Yes. A sage whose Shahnameh is packed with philosophical and spiritual insight, drawing from both Iranian culture and Islamic thought.
Right. And as we usually do, let's leave our listeners with a final thought to mull over.
Okay. So we've discussed how Ferdowsi, in this interpretation, links Hosti existence with Rasti, truth, or rightness. The idea that aligning with truth gives real strength, puts you in sync with the wave of existence.
So here's something for you to consider. What might it mean in your own life, maybe, when you're facing a challenge or a tough decision, to consciously try and seek out that Rasti?
Could focusing deliberately on truthfulness, in your thoughts and your actions, could that actually reveal a source of strength or maybe illuminate a path forward that you couldn't see before?
Just something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Ferdowsi's philosophical world as seen through these particular conversations.
And remember, this was deep dive number 9 in our 15-part series, Wisdom Unveiled. We hope you'll join us for the next one.